Good afternoon and welcome to this special commission business meeting of the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. Before we begin, let's take a roll call of commissioners. Present in the hearing room, we have Commissioners Thomas, Powers, and Belser. Joining us virtually, we have Commissioners Irvin and Caston. I note that Commissioner C. Williams and Chairman J. Williams are not in attendance today. General Counsel Hill, I'll recognize you to introduce today's meeting.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner and Vice Chair Belser. This is a special business meeting of the Commission. The only item on your agenda today is to conduct the public interview of PA Consulting Group Incorporated related to the proposal in response to solicitations and docket numbers 2023-15E, 2023-16E, and 2023-17E.
Thank you, General Counsel Hill. For those that may be watching on live stream, I do apologize for the delay in starting. We had some technical difficulties that we were trying to get resolved, and appreciate the parties that were experiencing those difficulties working with us to get those resolved as well. So today we are here to interview PA Consulting Group Incorporated, who's filed a response to our RFP for an independent third-party expert to assist the Commission in the 2023 avoided cost dockets for our electrical utilities. PA Consulting, are y'all connected with us? There we go.
We are.
We've got several commissioners that are I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves in just a moment, but we have several commissioners that will be asking questions. And because we see you and not your name now, if you are responding, would you help us out by giving us your name with each response? Because the court reporter is in here transcribing this meeting, and it will assist her to know who is speaking, if you don't mind. Hope that won't be too onerous. I understand it'll be a little repetitive, but it does help us out, and I appreciate that. So welcome to this virtual presentation to the South Carolina Public Service Commission, and who have we got on the screen with us?
Thank you, and good afternoon to all of you. My name is Charles Janicek. I am a long-time consultant with PA. I've got about 27 years in the industry, and about 16 of those have been with PA Consulting, spread over 2 stints. I've done a lot of procurement support work in my career, including most recently, it's what I've focused on. I've been an independent evaluator overseeing procurements with PG&E and San Diego Gas and Electric in California, as well as PacifiCorp, working for the Oregon Public Utilities Commission. I've also done a lot of prudency determination and other types of procurement support for the North Dakota Public Service Commission. And looking forward to this interview and the prospect of working with you all on these avoided cost reviews. I will ask Matt Morin to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Matt Morin from PA Consulting Group. I've been with PA and predecessors for approximately 22 years. I started my career building competitive energy market models with a focus on the power sector. Effectively, when the U.S. built approximately 25% increase in power generation supply in the early 2000s, that created an oversupply situation and a distressed state of power generation. Realized that perfectly competitive markets are somewhat challenged, and then went on a journey of really looking to understand policy and advising utilities on ultimately strategies and things of that nature. Fast forward to today, I'm one of the leaders of our team of approximately 80 energy market utility advisors, and I'll describe that team and what we do shortly. Jim, would you like to go next?
Good afternoon. This is Jim Heidel from PA Consulting. I have approximately 40 years of experience in the electric and natural gas industries. Actually, from about 1990 to 2000, I worked at Puget Sound Energy, a combined gas and electric utility, in various positions. I was actually their director of federal and state regulation. Over the course of my career, I've testified in front of many commissions, Washington, North Dakota, Minnesota, Louisiana, Maryland, and a few other, Indiana, and a few others. I do a lot of work representing the advocacy staff of North Dakota Public Service Commission on various matters. I have testified on integrated resource plans and developed IRPs and done a lot of work on marginal costs and avoided costs. Andy, would you please introduce yourself?
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andy Rieger. I have been consulting in the electric business for the better part of the last 15 years. My background is primarily focused around electric utility cost allocation, functionalization, and electric rate design, with an emphasis sort of around emerging technologies, marginal costs, and net metering policy for solar and other sort of behind the meter generation technologies. I have myself sponsored testimony before regulatory bodies in California, Indiana, and Colorado 5 times, primarily around sort of marginal cost issues and strategic electric rate design. So looking forward to the potential to work with you all and to Martin now.
Thank you, Andy. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Martin Szczepanik, and I'm from PA Consulting. I'm a principal consultant. I've been a consultant in the energy industry for about 8 years now, specializing in procurement support, specifically in generation procurement. Prior to PA, I was with Guidehouse, where I supported procurements for APS and their all source, for Xcel Energy for a solar plant, and for DTE for small scale procurement. I also support in financial modeling for generation assets, and I do a lot of utility strategy work. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. And just so that you know who the commissioners are, I am Florence Belser. I'm current vice chair of the commission. With me are Commissioners Delton Powell, Commissioner Hedden Thomas, and then virtually we have Commissioner Tom Irvin and Commissioner Mike Caston. So you'll be hearing probably from each of us, or most of us anyway, but it's good to have you here. And if you don't mind, do you have an introduction that you want to give, or do you want us to just start in with some of the questions that we are have for you?
Matt Morin from PA. Ms. Vice Chair, we would appreciate being able to share a few slides to give an overview of our company and our group.
That would be great. Please proceed.
So PA Consulting Group is approximately 3,500 employees globally. We're focused on 7 different sectors globally. In the US, we're approximately 400 individuals, of which 110 of us are focused on the energy and utility sector. Our team's overall purpose is to be the leading advisor to clean energy transition. And in doing so, that means we work with all types of stakeholders overall, and we'll get to that in a moment. We ultimately focus on long-term policy, regulation, emerging technology, market structure, and market fundamental uncertainty in the natural gas, power, and clean energy sectors. And then we most often suffice 4 primary client needs. 1, energy infrastructure investment. 2, strategy and risk management. 3, utility M&A and growth advisory. And then 4, restructuring and litigation. And if we can perhaps move to the next slide. And so a lot of our work is with energy infrastructure investors, as well as utilities and regulators and law firms. But ultimately, we work across the entire value chain as it relates to the energy sector. And you can see from this graphic and the demonstrative in the middle that we've supported a large number of engagements with utilities, with clean energy and battery generation systems, natural gas generation, nuclear, emerging technologies such as hydrogen, as well as offshore wind, transmission delivery systems, and also coal generation assets, as well as supply. Importantly, and we'll cover this in some of the questions we anticipate being asked, we have evolved from approximately 10 individuals in the 2010 timeframe focused on market and asset analytics to, at this point, like I said, 110 individuals that are focused on ultimately utility and energy market advisory. We move on to the next slide, please.
And this is Martin Stepanek from PA Consulting. And we wanted to just give a quick high level overview of what our process would be for project delivery. And this has also been included in our proposal. And this is essentially the end-to-end process, and this should dovetail nicely into the questions. So the way that we see this project going, as we do with similar projects, is we'll start off with kickoff meetings. And this will include kickoff meetings both with the commission as well as with the individual utilities. We'll begin then by reviewing the avoided cost filings, so both current year filings as well as prior year filings, identifying any differences or patterns, as well as looking at avoided cost filings that we see that might have similarities across the country. From there, we will develop information requests and submit these questions and requests to utilities. And we believe that the utilities will provide us this information both in written format as well as in meetings, and we do believe that this will be an iterative process with questions and answers and back and forth. In step 5, we will develop the PA avoided cost report. We actually foresee us developing a outline initially, but this will be filling out the details with the information that we get from the utilities. And when the experts throughout our practice will take a look at the information that's provided. And lastly, there's task 6 optional. So providing expert testimony. As per Jim and other people on this call, we do have experience providing testimony on behalf of public service commissions. And last but not least, throughout this whole entire process, we do have an ongoing project management team. And this will be to make sure that everything's on time, on budget, on schedule, and with the appropriate quality.
Martin, this is Jim Hydell. May I just make one comment? In the kickoff meetings, we will definitely be cognizant of ex parte rules, and we will be following all the commission rules.
Yes, thank you, Jim.
Does that conclude the PowerPoint?
It does, and you know, at this point, you know, we're a little unsure of the exact format of the questions. If you all are going to sort of lead those, we have received and reviewed and prepared answers for the individual questions from Dominion, as well as Duke Energy, as well as the commission. And I guess I will ask you kind of which of those questions will come first, and how you'd like to sort of handle all the individual questions.
We will go through those, and that's good to know. And I don't want to throw you a curveball here, but after reading your proposal and seeing your PowerPoint, if I could start off on some things that are not on those written questions, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And let me just lay a little bit of groundwork here, if I could. In the last avoided cost cases, and those were in 2019, and actually the ones preceding that, we were in a situation where the consultant was acquired after the applications for the avoided cost proceedings were filed by the utilities. And so what we are trying to do now is secure an independent third-party consultant, have those selected before the applications are filed in 2023, so that the consultant can be on board and conduct its work as the materials, the applications, the pleadings, discovery by the parties, and other matters are filed. So it's not a matter of catching up afterwards, but to be in the process as things are happening. This would allow the consultant to conduct its or work through its analysis, I suppose, as the case unfolds for the parties, reviewing many of the matters and activities as they happen instead of after the fact. Just my perspective of where I think this case will go, and the actual schedule will be set later, probably fall of this year. But I would anticipate that applications would be filed in the March, April timeframe. We would anticipate initial hearings on the applications, I don't know, July, August, September timeframe. I'm sorry, I keep looking at something I've got on the screen over here, and I probably need to be looking at the camera, but the parties would present their testimony and evidence at that initial hearing. And then once that initial hearing is held, the consultant's report would be due after that. And then a second hearing would be held somewhere in the September, possibly October, but we have to have a decision made by December 16th. So probably in the September timeframe, we would have a second part of the hearing where the consultant would present their report to the commission to get it into the evidence of the hearing. And at that point, the parties could ask the consultants questions on different things regarding the report. So with that kind of rough schedule, or what we anticipate the schedule to be, I need for y'all to think about a couple of things, like how long would you anticipate to complete and file the report of each docket following the first hearing? You just may want to make note of that. We can come back to this at the end. Are you aware of any conflicts in the March through October 2023 timeframe which could prevent your firm or cause hardship for your firm completing the work needed under these solicitations? And then are you aware of any conflicts in the, say, July through October 2023 timeframe which would prevent someone from working on these matters, viewing the hearings in these cases, and then having a witness to testify at a hearing and be subject to questioning from the parties? So I'm going to throw those out, and I'll come back to those, give you a time to think about that a little bit. One of the other things that I wanted to touch on at the beginning is it's regarding the ex parte statutes that we here at the commission are under. And you touched on it in your PowerPoint, and I had also noticed it in your proposal. It was in the proposed summary and in the, I think it was the section on project approach, with the references to the project kickoff workshops with commission staff, and a reference that we would periodically share with commission staff an avoided cost report outline, and multiple review cycles with the commission prior to finalizing the report. The issue that we have is that the statute allows us to hire an independent third-party consultant. So as we, or this commissioner, I think most of the commissioners view this statute, we can't have, and our staff cannot have, these periodic meetings with y'all. This consultant is truly independent. We do not direct ongoing, what's going on here or getting updates or anything, and it's very difficult. We need someone that can get the material, review it, ask discovery type questions, whether it be interrogatories or requests to produce from the utilities and other parties potentially, and then synthesize their report to provide, I think the statute talks about independently derived conclusions as to the consultant's opinion of each utility's calculation of avoided cost. So this would be somewhat different from what I envision you have done for other commissions, where you work with the staff and work with the commission to guide them. This is something that is an independent of us report and analysis to help us evaluate the utilities applications. And when I say utilities, I'm talking about all three. And I think y'all have entered a solicitation for all three, but Dominion, Progress Energy, and Duke Energy Progress and Duke Energy Carolinas. So I just want you to be a little aware of those restrictions. And as we go through today, you may want to consider those our reading and our how we envision this happening. Any questions thus far?
This is Jim Hydell. I read the ex parte rules, prior to, to this call, admittedly after the submitting the proposal. And that's why I made the comment when Martin was going over the sheet. We are well aware now of the ex parte rules. We have internal counsel that we go through, these types of matters with to make sure that we're following those procedures. And I'm sure as the interview unfolds, we are fully capable of doing this project totally independently and providing an independent opinion.
And I will thank you. I will admit our ex parte statute is a bit convoluted and it's a bit unusual. I don't know that it's all of those details are spelled out elsewhere, but it guides us very well, and it does provide some good walls so that we are insulated and our staff is insulated. So it's worked well. It's just a bit unusual to see at times. So, and I'm just going to go into some of mine. And as you're aware, if you've read the code in South Carolina involving avoided costs, it's in 58-41-20. The consultant must, the way I view this is the consultant must be able to work independently without commission involvement to provide the independently derived conclusions as to the consultant's opinion of each utility's calculation of avoided costs, consistent with PURPA and FERC regulations and orders and South Carolina law, including that statute. So, first of all, even though we can't, the commission nor the commission employees could interact with the consultant prior to, we would receive the report and then have the consultant available to testify at the hearing. Even though we couldn't interact, the consultant is also subject to those same ex parte prohibitions that the commission and the parties must adhere to. So in getting information from the utilities, the consultant would need to copy all the parties, so there's no ex parte communications. The way it's happened in the past is the consultant basically seeks information and documentations through discovery requests such as interrogatories and requests to produce. Would development of interrogatories and requests to produce or information gathering, allowed information gathering, things in writing, matters in writing, would that present a problem for your firm?
I would say it doesn't present a problem. It is a bit of a departure from what we had envisioned in our proposal. As Martin outlined, it was our sort of expectation that we may be able to schedule meetings with the utilities sort of via telephone, conference calls to sort of ask questions and discuss things that we were curious about with their filings. It sounds to me like that probably is not going to be not allowed under your rules. Do I have that right?
Not unless all the parties had the opportunity to be in that meeting. Because even though the commission can't talk to you, you as the commission, or if your firm were selected as the commission's third-party consultant, you are bound by the same ex parte prohibition. So you couldn't have those independent meetings with the utilities or with an independent meeting with one of the parties without all of them being present.
Okay, and you mentioned that the parties need to have the opportunity to be present. So if for example, and I don't know if we would go down this route, but if we were to schedule a conference among all the parties, but some party may choose not to join. Does that satisfy, or do they have to be present to, to have sort of a quorum, if that makes sense?
The ex parte law under the Administrative Procedures Act, and I'm going from memory here, says reasonable opportunity. So it has to be something that the parties could have an opportunity to schedule to be with you. It couldn't be like calling somebody at 8:30 and saying we need to have a conference call at 4 or something like that. There needs to be the reasonable opportunity, but we would need to check on that further because I'm going by memory here.
That's helpful. Thank you. And then one other quick question, and you may or may not be able to answer. Are you aware, did the prior independent consultant, did they convene party-wide meetings such as we would envision, or did that not occur?
I'm not aware of that. I know that that there were, say, written interrogatories and requests for written discovery, and those questions were provided to all the parties. They were also filed on our docket management system. I don't know if you've had a chance to look through that. Now, the responses were not filed out there to make them public, but I think the questions were, is my recollection, subject to check.
This is Jim Heidel, PA Consulting. I just want to take this point a minute to emphasize that we are used to working in civil litigation and regulatory litigation. We are very familiar with writing interrogatories and writing them in a way to make sure we get the information that we need in a form that we need. As Charles pointed out, we've been in a number of proceedings where, sometimes after the interrogatories, it was very helpful to be able to have follow-up direct conversations. But if that's not, since that's not allowed, that's just the process, and we can work with that process. Okay,
thank you very much. There are some things that, for instance, if you didn't get the responses to the discovery that you anticipated, or you don't think it's complete, there is a provision that allows you to ask in writing the commission to compel response. So it's not that you're totally cut off, but everything has to be transparent, has to be above board, and the commission nor the commission staff can be involved in the day-to-day direction of the consultant. The consultant is truly independent here. So I just wanted you to be aware of that as we go forward. Let's see. There's also a requirement to evaluate or assess the level of cooperation received from the utility. I don't know if in the report, and just wanted to know if you were aware of that requirement.
Yes, we read that in the statute. We also noticed in the LEI report that was one of the sections. So, that would be, we'd comply with the statute and we would write that section.
And the utility may, and this is also allowed by statute, may require confidentiality agreements before divulging some of the information. Is there any issue with a confidentiality agreement and then maintaining that information confidential within your firm?
This is Jim Heidel. We are very used to confidentiality agreements. We sign them all the time. If I could just make one comment, we ran across a confidentiality standard agreement in Louisiana, where it was, if you saw their super sensitive information, you couldn't work for anybody, for any utility without any expiration date in that region. And for those reasons, we declined. but as long as it's a confidentiality agreement that pertains to the, to the information in the docket and, around that, we are very used to that and are happy to comply with that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, I'm going to turn to some of my colleagues and let them ask a few questions, and they'll probably be going through some of the lists that were provided. And I'll probably have some further on, but thank you very much for your responses. Commissioners?
Madam Vice Chair,
Commissioner Thomas.
thank you. This is really, I guess, just sort of a follow-up to some of the points that the Vice Chair just made. So this will involve a hearing with members of your team, testifying and being sworn in and all of that stuff. And as part of that hearing, you will be, answering the questions and presenting your report. And but you won't be able to have an attorney representing you, so you'll be on your own. Is that something that this firm has done in other jurisdictions, or is that another new twist for South Carolina?
This is Charles Janicek with PA Consulting. We have certainly presented information and information and described our testimony in front of other commissions without attorneys present. I do have one quick question, and then I'd like to let Jim Heidel chime in. But I'm curious, when we talk about testifying and being sworn in for verbal testimony, that's our understanding of what that would be. But I'm curious if when we talk about testimony, are we discussing the consultant here providing pre-filed written testimony, or is it more limited to verbal testimony, in addition to our filed report, of course, but asking about specific filed testimony and whether or not that's contemplated here, or if it's more of the consultant being sworn in and answering questions, but not filing written testimony, if that makes sense.
I believe, as I recall, that this is going to be more the verbal sworn-in testimony. I don't recall in the past that the consultant pre-filed written testimony. Perhaps I'm wrong. Is any thoughts on that, Vice Chair?
I don't recall the consultant filing pre-filed written testimony. I think it was the oral testimony on the report itself and answering questions. The report was kind of the pre-file. I think that was viewed as the pre-filed testimony, and so it was the testimony that to allow the parties to inquire about how, whether they had questions about aspects of the report. So it was not. Now that's the last one. This is only the third avoided cost hearings that some of us have been through, and since this statute has been implemented or enacted, so we're refining things as we go. But previously, it was the last time the report acted as the pre-file testimony, is my recollection. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. That pretty much confirms the way I recall as well. I think at this point I'm just gonna let other commissioners see if they have questions and just move forward from there. Thank you.
Commissioner Powers.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And welcome to all of you who are here today. Certainly you have a wide range of experience individually and together. And, you know, we are fairly new at this procedure, and there's some questions I wanted to ask just to kind of clear up any possible conflicts or things we should look for. I want to say I saw somewhere that in the past you had done some work for this commission, and obviously that would have been before me and other commissioners. Can you elaborate on that if it was so?
Yes, this is Matt Morin, and thank you. No members of the proposed team have appeared before the South Carolina PSC.
Okay. In the report that I'm looking at, it says having worked not only with South Carolina in the past, but also others. We worked prior engagement related to independent management audit of Duke Power Company's service restoration procedures for its South Carolina retail electric service area. So I mean, that's where my question comes from.
This is Charles Janasek with PA Consulting. It may be, I recall that qualification and that we did do that work for Duke. I believe it was 2008 timeframe. I'm subject to check. I don't believe that directly led to appearing before the commission, but we can double check that.
Okay. Well, and of course that goes to my first questions. If you had appeared, have you been employed by anyone besides Duke or by Dominion or any of their affiliates in the past?
This is Charles Janasek with PA Consulting. Thank you for as a follow-up to the prior question, someone within PA who is not on this project team had done that work and had appeared before the commission in terms of Duke's audit. But as I said, I think that was about 15 years ago, and it's nobody that's on this current team. So that's what we meant when we said that we have not appeared before the commission. And I will let Matt discuss work that we've done with Duke or Dominion.
Yes, Matt Morin again. Our last consulting engagement with Duke was in 2014, and PA has done work for Dominion, but the last engagement was in 2019. And in 2018 and 19, there were two projects of approximately, we would consider relatively small, and they were in the merger and acquisition nature and not in the utility strategy or advisory nature.
Okay. Is anyone in this that's going to be working on this ever been retained to represent these companies in South Carolina?
We can say certainly not in the last decade and doubtfully in our history.
All right. Do any of the group that will be working on this or members of your family have stock in Duke Energy Carolinas, Duke Energy Progress, or Dominion Energy?
This is Matt Morin again, and each of the project team members have checked that and have confirmed that that is the case in terms of individual or family interests in stock of either Dominion or Duke.
Do you have any reason to believe that you couldn't serve as a fair and impartial and independent consultant on any of these dockets?
No.
Okay. Is there any present business dealings with either Duke Energy, Duke Energy Progress, Duke Energy Carolinas, or Dominion Energy at this time?
Per our conflicts check, we do not have any other current business dealings with the parties in these dockets.
Okay. I looked at the resumes or the information provided. It's as far as education, that sort of thing, with 5 of you, I don't want to go into all of that, but have any of you or all of you or which ones of you ever been qualified as an expert in this area of avoided cost or electrical energy or in the areas that you will be working?
This is Jim Hydell. I have testified in North Dakota and Minnesota on the resource plans and plant acquisitions of Montana Dakota Utilities. I have testified in North Dakota on the economics of resource plans and different assets being proposed by Otter Tail Power, Montana Dakota Utilities, and Northern States Power Company. I have testified in Washington State for Puget Sound Energy on rate matters and marginal cost. In those processes, there was never a Daubert hearing challenging a credential, but I have those credentials for testifying. Thank you.
Well, as far as who's going to be the principal consultant, I can't imagine 5 people being called to testify. Who would be the one who would be the principal person that would present the report and be available to testify, or which ones do you anticipate doing the testifying?
This is Charles Janasek with PA Consulting. I would say we typically in engagements like this, we sort of make sure that we have qualified expert witnesses on the team. And frankly, then it sort of becomes a bit of a decision based on who is the best suited based on the material that we uncover as we go forward. I believe we're all qualified. I personally have testified before the North Dakota Public Service Commission, as well as Jim. And I know that Andy has also presented testimony to a number of different commissions. Andy?
This is Andy Rieger with PA Consulting. So I've appeared before the California Public Utilities Commission on 2 occasions with regard to electric utility cost accounting and functionalization, and then also in electric rate design, specifically looking at marginal cost of service studies. I've appeared before the Indiana Regulatory Commission as well with regard to electric rate design that included marginal cost of service, looking at electric vehicle charging for public charging stations. And then finally also before the Colorado Public Utilities Commission, looking at a fairly narrowly defined fuel cost recovery issue.
All right, anyone else?
This is Matt Morin. I submitted testimony in the state of Colorado before the Public Utility Commission there as it relates to the need for resource planning and whether or not it was on point or not relative to the large saturation of wind generation in the region. And with that, you can have large ramp down events. So you could have 2,100 megawatts of wind at one time. They can go down to 300 megawatts all at once. And then that would create an ancillary services and quick start related need. And so that would be applicable from a subject matter expert point of view as it relates to the ancillary services portion of the avoided cost. Thank you.
Okay. Going back to the issue about conflicts, are you able to provide us with written proof of a conflicts check from your firm?
This is Charles Janasek with PA Consulting. Yes, we can definitely provide a written conflicts check.
Okay. And I'm not going to get into anything confidential, but in your listing as to who's involved, I'm not sure I really understand which parties would be involved, members of management, associated partners, what directors, how that would be involved. Your breakdown just I wasn't really sure if someone can give me just a brief explanation of why there's a breakdown or how upper management would be involved in a project like this.
This is Matt Morin. I am technically out of the 110 individuals in Energy and Utilities US, I'm the line management leader of 80 of those individuals. So I would be the partner in charge of the overall assignment, in charge of the oversight of the delivery, ultimately, and also weigh in as a subject matter expert, but would not be intimately involved in the delivery. The assignment manager would be Martin in this case. And then, Jim is the head of our rate forecasting team among the many hats that he wears, and would also be a subject matter expert. And then obviously, as discussed earlier, potential, verbal testimony provider. And then meanwhile, Andy Rieger as well as Charles Janicek are subject matter experts primarily as it relates to rates in the case of Andy Rieger. And then for Charles Janicek, primarily around resource planning. And that is effectively the composition of the team. And then we have other individuals that are part of our, 110 person team that, depending on availability, can support Martin and the group around them. Hopefully that's clear.
What would be your schedule for project completion?
This is Charles Janicek with PA Consulting. I think that we had talked in our proposal around an approximate 3 to 4 month period to complete the report. It sounded like at the beginning when there was discussion of the hearing schedules and that I'm going back to my notes here. It looks like the applications will likely be filed sometime in the spring, March, April timeframe of 2023, with the first set of hearings in the sort of July, August timeframe, and then the report would need to be filed in advance of the second hearing, which is likely to be in the September to October timeframe of 2023. I want to make sure I have that sort of overall timeline correct. In terms of our schedule, I think that all works well. If the avoided cost applications are sort of filed in the March to April timeframe, that is about four plus months to be able to file the report in advance of the second hearing. We certainly can work with you to specify a specific timeline as we get closer to those hearings being actually scheduled on when a sufficient time in advance of that second hearing is necessary to have the report filed. Typically there may be a 2 week in advance of the hearing, something like that. But I think that from March through September is our time frame, and we certainly will work to make sure that we meet the timing requirements to get our report filed in advance of that hearing.
Do you have any estimate as to how many labor hours or how much actual time this would require from your perspective?
Yes, we had built up our cost estimate. This is Charles Janicek with PA Consulting. We had built up our cost estimate on a task by task basis. We recognize that sitting here at the beginning of the process, it's certainly difficult to specify them exactly overall as well as for each task. Sometimes they get shifted around between tasks, but in general, we've estimated approximately 550 hours of labor time across our team to look at all 3 dockets.
All right, sir. Does your firm contribute to any political action committee?
This is Charles Janicek with PA, and I actually think that Matt Morin is the best person to answer that.
This is Matt Moore, and no.
Good. Is anyone of your group that will be closely involved in this that has worked for a public utility or a solar company in the past?
This is Charles Janicek. Of us five, I personally have worked for XL Energy for about 5 years in their resource planning department. I know that Jim also has worked for Puget Sound Energy. I'm not sure exactly of those dates. My time with XL Energy was from 2006 to 2011.
Is
This
anyone?
is Jim Hydell, PA. My dates at Puget Sound Energy were roughly 1988 through 2000.
All right, thank you. Is anyone associated with this group that would have an affiliation with a public utility or solar company now at this time?
This is Charles Janicek. No.
Okay. Are any of you five attorneys?
This is Matt Morin. None of us five are attorneys. We have two individuals with a law degree on our team of 110. We also have approximately 15 PhDs, ballpark 20 MBAs, and so on.
Okay. Well, as far as drafting the pleadings, discovery, et cetera, how would your team do that? I mean, you outside counsel, inside counsel?
This is Charles Janicek with PA Consulting. We typically will use in-house counsel to help us draft and review our testimony and other filings within the docket.
All right. Thank you. That's all I have at this time.
Commissioners, any questions?
Madam Vice Chair.
Commissioner Thomas?
Thank you. So how about members of this team or the organization? Are you members of utility-related trade organizations?
This is Charles Janicek with PA Consulting. We PA in general does not we're not members of any specific trade organizations, or certainly not any utility advocacy organizations. I believe we do have, I actually will ask Matt Moore, and I know we've gone back and forth on this. It's not clear to me if we have determined if we are a member of EEI.
Hello, this is Matt Morin again. So we want to be obviously always fully transparent. The organizations we are members of or have membership in include AGA, American Society of Appraisers, Western Energy Institute, UK Nuclear Industry Association, A Word About Wind, Westminster Energy Forum, Association of Women in Energy, Women in Water, Energy and Environment, as well as well, it's more internal, so I'm not going to go beyond that. I think it's also important to note that any sort of organizational memberships are generally for the purposes of overall business development and networking, so that we understand industry trends, but also are networked within the overall energy sector. Importantly, and this hasn't been stated previously, but independence is of utmost importance to our firm as well as our group overall. We do not take advocacy positions, full stop. And if we were to take advocacy positions, that would put at risk our independent brand, which would do harm and detriment to our overall business and a very strong growth trajectory for the 22 years that at least I've been at PA Consulting Group.
Okay, so it sounded to me like you named a few organizations that are environmentally related, and just to be clear, it sounds to me like that your firm or individuals are not involved in lobbying efforts. Is that correct?
This is Matt Morin. That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have right now.
Have we lost one of the feeds from one of the PA members?
That's a good question, Madam Vice Chair. This is Charles Janicek. We did have one of our members, Andy Rieger, who has messaged us that he was having difficulties and he had dropped off the call. He expects to be able to rejoin the call when he is able.
Do we need to pause for a few minutes?
I think it may be longer than that. And so I think that the rest of the team here is able to answer these questions unless you prefer to pause. It's unclear to me how long it will be.
It's up to you, Mr. Janicek.
This is Matt Morin. We are okay to proceed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Caston, I see you online. Do you have questions?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Vice Chair, if I may ask a few,
Please.
if it's okay with PA.
Please go ahead.
I'm gonna be going back and forth on my screen here, so. And I guess just to go over some of these. Relative to, I guess, the modeling or any modeling, does PA have modeling capabilities in-house to do any modeling necessary or required?
Hello, Commissioner. This is Matt Morin. Yes, absolutely. For over 20 years, we've developed a suite of market and asset analytic tools to provide full functionality of advisory and expertise across the energy value chain. Off the top of my head, some of those tools include natural gas market models. GPCM would be the third-party software. Power market models, that includes GEPSLF, which is transmission load flow, as well as Aurora, power market production cost model. We also have our own proprietary capacity compensation tools and models. We also have our own proprietary ancillary services tools and models. We have our own proprietary clean energy market and renewable compensation outlook tools and models. In addition, we also have proprietary asset analytics that includes storage, renewable, stochastic dispatch optimization, which is applied most often to natural gas assets. We also have our own proprietary retail rate forecasting tools that is ultimately led by Jim as well as Andy Rieger. We have our own proprietary methods for doing third-party integrated resource planning outlooks, both in support of utilities as well as evaluation of utilities integrated resource plans. I could probably keep going, but I hopefully that gives a somewhat of a rich picture of the types of foundational market and asset analytic tools that we have.
This is Jim Heidel, PA Consulting. If I could just add to that, because some of the other questions that came across, in terms of while we don't run those models, we used to run ProSim. We're very familiar with ProSim if that's what the utilities are using. We are used to reviewing utility filings that use Strategist and Encompass and very familiar with their inputs and outputs. So in the case of those models, we would not run those in-house, but through interrogatories, if that's what the utilities are using, we would ask them to run scenarios for us. Thank you.
Relative to that long suite of, I guess, models and technical abilities you guys have, I guess, have they been peer reviewed or or validated in any way?
Yes, this is Matt Moran. Yes, Commissioner Caston. The fundamental analytics that our group has at our foundation have been utilized in some of the largest bankruptcies as well as litigation disputes in U.S. History. That includes, for example, nearly all of the independent power producing bankruptcy proceedings in the 2000s, as well as valuation disputes around shareholder litigation and some earnings claims that independent power producers had made, and whether or not those were misleading, and as well as other insurance oriented claims where we were ultimately able to leverage our market analytics suite to backcast things like the California energy crisis in 2000, 2001 to get within 5% of the actual price outcomes, for example.
Okay, which leads me actually to, I guess, the second part of my question then. Would PA attempt to replicate the utilities model, or would you use your own experience and information received and using your own models and methods to determine, I guess, the reasonableness, whether it's reasonable or not, the utilities information or not? How would PA do that?
This is Charles Janicek with PA Consulting. Frankly, what we have found is that we certainly can use the Aurora model, which is a commercially available software. To the extent we can use that model to attempt to replicate the utilities results. However, that works best in cases where the other party, the utility, also uses the Aurora model, right? Because it's a lot more efficient and it leads to a more efficient outcome than trying to fit another model to replicate that utilities model. And that's what Mr. Heidel was getting at when he said that to the extent that the utilities, the parties to these dockets, use some other model other than the Aurora model, those will be models that we are familiar with across our team. We generally have familiarity with all of the commercially available production cost models. And so we would then, to the extent that we come on to issues as we're reviewing their filings, and if we need to understand the impacts of perhaps changing some foundational assumptions, we would then request the utility itself to run that alternate sensitivity. And then we are very comfortable and familiar with reviewing the inputs and outputs of those other models to get comfort that the utility, did what we asked them to and produced the result that we were asking for. Jim, I don't know if you have any other thoughts here.
No, I would just say that, back in the early 2000s, when we worked on the new source review lawsuits, we found that replicating someone's results is a very time-consuming activity, because even if, as for Mr. Janicek's example of Aurora, there are a lot of switches and things. So I think the better approach would be to review their inputs and outputs, make sure they're reasonable, and validate it with our own models.
And this is Matt Warren, just to add on, I mean, when we think of the avoided, cost components, energy costs, capacity costs, ancillary services, transmission and distribution associated costs, integration, interconnection, variable environmental, and, overhead, line loss, et cetera. These are the types of costs that we routinely dig into on a market expert and asset expert and due diligence point of view. in the context of, rate forecasting, utility advisory, forecasting markets and the performance of assets within both financial and operational. And so we have a trained eyes to know where both history has been, as well as where the market exists today and where it logically would be headed in the future as it relates to the assumptions that the utility is making with those inputs and outputs. Outputs more so results, obviously. And so that's one critical element of what our project team brings to the table, and being able to efficiently and effectively ultimately review what the utilities are putting forth and really, get to the heart of whether or not it's reasonable or not.
Okay, so what I think I'm hearing is PA, your approach would be more geared toward verifying the information or numbers maybe that the utilities come up with using whatever models they use. But PA would more or less verify one way or the other those numbers independently using your own models, information, resources, experience. Is that correct?
This is Charles Janasek with PA Consulting. That is correct. In addition to scrubbing through the utilities models and directing them to do additional runs if we think it's appropriate or necessary, we also, as both Jim and Matt alluded to, we model the entire country. We model the Southeast quite frequently. We have a general sense for what the cost structures are of different load serving entities in the region, and so we will be able to sort of use our own fundamental modeling. I don't want to represent that we are going to explicitly run avoided cost studies for these individual utilities, but we will be able to sense check them for reasonableness against our own internal modeling in combination with scrubbing through the utilities filings specifically, if that helps.
Thank you. I should have had you say reasonableness for me. That's a tough, long word for a Southerner.
It's a tough, long word for me as well.
And I think I understood you to say also that there may be instances where you would request the utilities to rerun the model with some different inputs or input suggestions or recommendations. Is that correct?
That's correct. This is Charles Janasek with PA Consulting. I will say that, we have found, and in reviewing the dockets from the prior avoided cost dockets, as well as our own sort of all the other types of work that we do, we understand that the issues here with their avoided cost filings are not likely to be specifically related to the actual calculations, right? Like, we have found that generally the controversial issues are much more related to sort of the broad assumptions that are feeding into those calculations and how the utility thinks about its long-term resource mix and what that's going to mean around its long-term avoided costs. So we may very well come upon issues that we will be interested to understand the impact of a certain assumption, and if changing that assumption would change the avoided costs. In those instances, we would be likely to request the utility to rerun some aspect of their filing with those different assumptions. But again, it's not that we are sort of checking their algebra, if you will, as much as trying to get an understanding of what assumptions are driving their view of their avoided costs and whether or not those assumptions themselves are reasonable. We certainly will check all the calculations, but I don't anticipate that we would find mathematical errors as much as differences in opinions around assumptions.
Okay, so that makes sense. So you're not talking about an infinite number of reruns. Uh, okay, and in essence, that's all it is. I guess the old garbage in, garbage out relative to models. You just want to verify that whatever assumptions or inputs make sense based on your firm's experience and information, correct?
This is Matt Moore, and yes, Commissioner Cat, you've hit upon a very fond point of ours, which is if you start trusting and relying upon the tools and models and not the expertise and assumptions and the actual market acumen, you end up in a very bad place and position. And so obviously the utilities have highly qualified experts with the same mindset as does our group from an independent point of view. And it's about, the accuracy of the intent of the output actually, ultimately.
This is Jim Heidel, PA Consulting. I just want to say that the approach that Charles described is an approach that we've been using in multiple dockets in North Dakota and representing advocacy staff, and it seems to work very well.
Okay. And it seems like there's always questions about models. Whether it's not, can't even remember the ones. It seems like ProSim, Plexos, or whatever, which I'm assuming you guys are familiar with those particular models also.
This is Matt Moore. Yes, as well as we've run all of those, as well as Resolve. Well, we have members in our team that have run Resolve, ProMod, GE Maps. There's many more I could probably think of.
All right. I guess thinking more globally, as far as the final report or the document that will be effectively, I guess, your firm's testimony, the written report. I know there will be a lot of technical information in there. I've never seen one of your reports. Typically, do you do your report with the technical information and then written such that we can understand it?
This is Matt Morin. So we create reports on a weekly, if not daily basis, and their consumption is for multi purposes and uses. Some equity investment committees as it relates to energy infrastructure investors. At times, it's for debt investors in terms of underpinning, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of investment decision from a debt point of view. Similarly, when it relates to policy regulatory realms, we produce reports that are effectively of similar nature, but obviously customized for the question at hand. And I believe, subject to Check or Martin and Charles verification, we have submitted two public filings, one in Oregon and one in the state of New York. So you can get a flavor for the types of technical details and inputs, assumptions, and approach and diligence in those specific aspects. But every case tends to be unique as it relates to public policy / regulatory circumstances.
Yep, that's correct. Thank you, Matt. This is Charles Jansek with PA Consulting. Yes, we have, Commissioner Caston, we did submit those two reports that Matt alluded to with our proposals. And in particular, I would direct you to the independent evaluators closing report that we provided. That was our final report for a recent independent evaluator assignment that we conducted for Pacificor and the Oregon Public Utilities Commission. And it gives a good sense of how we think about independent evaluation of certain utility actions.
And thinking about, I guess, whether the benefits of awarding one contract or all three contracts, could you elaborate on that? The benefits of one versus all three, or all three versus one?
Sure. This is Charles Janicek with PA Consulting. We intentionally submitted for individual proposals for each of the individual dockets, but also, as you know, indicated in our proposal that it would be beneficial to have one firm do all three, as happened last time. I think the main primary benefit there is efficiencies. Certainly, it takes, as we're mobilizing this team and looking through these dockets, a lot of the issues, it appears to us from reviewing the prior filings, a number of the issues tend to be common, and even for issues that are not common across all three dockets, we think that it will provide the commission with good perspective if the consultant is writing and evaluating all three of them. It gives us that sort of high level look across all three dockets, and that we can identify common issues as well as compare and contrast differing issues that may arise. And so really that's the primary benefit, and as well as just the sort of working style of PA and our report writing style. And as we're going through those hearings, certainly the second hearing where we'll be providing oral testimony, we think it will provide the commission with just sort of ease of having to deal with one party who is aware of all three of the dockets.
Okay. And I guess relative to, your firm's record of producing projects on time and within budget. I know we talked some about what the schedule would be, but what is your firm's record of producing projects on time and within budget?
This is Matt Moore again, Commissioner Caston. Dare I say, nearly impeccable. In the 22 years, I can't think of any significant or at least damaging as it relates to process proceedings or in a regulatory sense or investment outcomes, failings of PA. If there were to be those type of outcome or scenario, it would create material damage to our overall brand and reputation in the industry. And I would believe could result in severe economic harm. And so reliable delivery and as well as managing of expectations and working within a laid out process is something that we're very, very effective at.
Good.
And this is Charles Janicek with VA Consulting. I will just add on to that, certainly all of our commission proceedings, we're well aware the schedules get set in advance. Filings cannot be filed late in our view, and I'm not aware of any of our work with North Dakota, California, and Oregon specifically where we have missed a filing deadline. I don't think there have been any instances.
That's good to hear. So I think about, wind focused or other energy source focused avoided cost, not commonly found maybe in South Carolina. How might that be relevant? I mean, I know you've said you had pretty broad experience across the country, but as it stands, we have no wind generation that I'm aware of. at least in South Carolina. How does that, how would that, I guess, work in your evaluation of avoided cost?
This is Jim Hydell from PA Consulting. I think as we all know that under PURPA, one of the options for avoided costs, especially avoided energy cost, is wholesale market. So that raises two questions. One is, does the utility have reasonable access to, the CERC or, to different points in the wholesale market? Is it a liquid market? And then are those liquid market assuming that those liquid market, are those prices influenced by wind and solar? If it's deliverable, the power doesn't have to be generated in state.
Right. Okay, thank you.
This is Matt Moore. Just to expand on that, I mean, we're obviously acutely aware of the fact that there's not a independent system operator and it's bilateral clearing of generation and load to the extent not self-served, and as it relates to imbalances that occur, and therefore firm transmission rates are critically important. Just to make a follow-on point. Thank you.
Have you guys much experience with power purchase agreements?
This is Matt Morin. Yes, absolutely. Probably collectively over the 22 years, our team has looked at thousands of power purchase agreements. I would surmise to say this team, knowing my own experience, is in the several hundreds.
So pretty much the same with like commitment to sell forms.
This is Jim Hydell. In terms of the South Carolina's, statute and the commitment to sell, we have not reviewed those specific forms. In our work, we're commonly, familiar with ISDA master agreements and other standard forms of for selling power.
Should also this is Matt Moore. Should also add that we have reviewed the Sandy Cooper investment opportunity on behalf of an investor that was perhaps 2-3 years ago. So that gave us additional familiarity with the South Carolina overall regulatory as well as market regime. And then over the course of the last several decades have analyzed, I believe, every independent power producing generator, that a lot of which is now under utility control. A lot of the Southern Company, Morant, as well as Progress, former generation under the merchant status, that again, a lot of that is now in a different state of ownership, I should say.
Understand. Thank you. And I think I've heard, if not all of you, some of you say I think, have read, pretty familiar with our statutes, Act 62 and regulations, and I'm assuming that is the case, correct? Madam Vice Chair, I have no more questions, and thank you, gentlemen, for enduring that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Caston. Gentlemen, we've been going about an hour and a half, and I think we're getting close to concluding, but I need to give our court reporter a break. She's been going nonstop. So could we take about 5 minutes and let's come back at, let me get the right time here. Say 2:40, that's 8 minutes on my cell phone, but let's reconvene at 2:40. That'll give us a chance to look at our notes to see if there's anything else and give you a chance to think if there's anything else you want to add to what you've already said. So we'll be back.
Great. That sounds good to us. Thank you.
Be back at 2:40. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for that break, and we are back in this special business meeting of the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. Present in the hearing room, we have Commissioners Thomas, Powers, and Belser, and appearing virtually, we have Commissioners Caston and Irvin. And I'd like to welcome back the folks from PA Consulting, and thank y'all for allowing us the short break. Commissioners, further questions? Well, I have a couple. Earlier, I believe it was Commissioner Powers asked if you or any members of your immediate family or partners own stock in the Duke Company, Duke Energy, or Dominion Energy that would be over the subsidiaries here in South Carolina. And I would just like to get another answer. I never heard a not in the response or the question. Maybe I just missed it, but could I get an answer to that question again, please?
Yeah, this is Matt Moore, and I answered previously. No is the short answer.
Okay. Thank you very much. I may have just missed that, and I apologize.
This is Jim Heidel from PA Consulting. Matt, I would just like to ask one qualifier is that members may have mutual funds that have individual stocks, but no individual ownership. Just to clarify.
Appreciate that clarification and understand it. Thank you. Gentlemen, I believe y'all indicated that some of you at least had looked at the dockets from the 2019 cases involving the avoided cost cases. And did you review the list of interveners in those cases?
This is Jim Heidel. Yes, we did.
Okay. Have y'all had any business dealings or done any work for any of those, any conflicts with any of those interveners from that case, those cases?
No, not that I'm aware. We have not run a formal conflicts check yet. We will do that as part of the earlier request, but none of those names are familiar.
Okay. Thank you very much. And if you would include in the conflicts check the listings of any work, even though you indicated that it had been some time, go back. Somebody indicated that there was some work done for Duke in 2014 and 2019 in Dominion. And at that time, if you could indicate where those were and just the general nature of it, if you would. Gentlemen, do y'all have anything else that you want to ask of us? I'm talking to y'all, PA.
This is Charles Janicek. With PA, I don't know that we have any specific questions. We had been a bit curious about the rules around meeting with the utilities as well as the general schedule, but I think we've covered those questions already in this discussion so far. I don't have any further questions.
Okay. I'm just kind of looking through my notes again. That was giving myself another chance to. Have y'all ever taken any public positions before any federal or state regulatory body advocated for any positions that could, or advocated those positions that could impact any of the issues in an avoided cost proceeding with regard to avoided costs, the nature of the PPAs, the notice of commitment forms, any of that?
This is Charles Janicek with PA Consulting, and I may ask others from the team to weigh in. Generally, we work very hard to not specifically advocate for any particular position. However, we do run analyses and provide sort of insights to other parties that may be advocating for a position. And I'm thinking of some of our North Dakota work. We definitely have provided opinions on different utilities filings before the North Dakota Commission. We provide those opinions to the commission staff, the advocacy staff, and those commissioners use that information in their deliberations, but it's not necessarily that's very specific to those individual dockets rather than advocating for some policy change or anything like that, if that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. You've indicated in some of your responses, and you've talked about your experience. Could you describe your familiarity with the electric system here in South Carolina, or even within the Southeast here, and how your familiarity with that would aid you in helping develop or review avoided cost in this
Sure.
in South Carolina?
This is Charles Jansuk with PA Consulting. In general, I would say, as I mentioned earlier, we do model the electric systems of the entire country quite frequently, and we do that both as a general matter to have a base case view of what each individual region of the country looks like, and we also do it for specific engagements as needed, typically to support some asset or utility transaction therein. Specific to South Carolina, I know Matt mentioned that we did work on the buy side. We did some due diligence for different investor groups that were potentially interested in purchasing Sante Cooper. I'm quite sure you're all familiar with that process when it happened. And I think Matt mentioned that we had done that for an investor group. I believe we were working for 3 different investor groups at the time, all in individual teams. So we were able to dig into not just Sante Cooper specifically, but also the electric operations of the entire Southeast grid and other entities within South Carolina. I know also that Andy has done some specific work in South Carolina as well.
That's right. This is Andy Rieger with PA. I just wanted to mention, while with the previous employer, I worked with Sante Cooper directly as a client in a cost of service and electric rate design advisory capacity. But had a long-running relationship with them for the better part of 8 years, looking at various issues, across the utilities operations. One I think of note here would be in looking at the utilities design of interruptible industrial rates, which included looking at a CT, the value of a CT, and the avoided cost of a CT, which informed that utilities interruptible rate design.
This is Jim Heidel, PA. Just one other comment, as Matt had alluded to earlier, that in South Carolina, it is, primarily, utilities, self-supply. They, meet, their capacity obligations, and they do a lot of PPAs and bilateral transactions. So we understand that it's a very different market than, let's say, the Northeast markets with ISOs. So, we understand that South Carolina, as a number of the southern states, are very different than some of the other East Coast states.
Thank you. With regard to ancillary service requirements, could you talk a little bit about your experience in studying and planning and maintaining the reliability of the transmission and distribution systems?
This is Matt Morin. Am I coming through on audio?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. So we, for the last 15 years, have had our own proprietary ancillary services modeling capability. And that includes regulation, spin, non-spin, all of the, sort of market-based products. And then obviously there's more of the tariff-based, black start and so on. And in this case, in a normal course of business, anytime we look at, for example, natural gas generation asset as well as a storage generation asset, and we probably look at ballpark in the vicinity of 250 such assets a year, natural gas or storage assets. A critical value component of those assets is ancillary services. And accordingly, we have a team of individuals that, one of their roles is to focus on ancillary services forecasting. Now, we also obviously understand that in a vertically integrated electric utility region without a liquid ISO to obviously, work with the imbalances, that there's a different sort of calculus that goes into the utility's operations as it relates to reliability without the market price signals that then result in the liquid sort of ISO driven ancillary service price outcomes. And we're very familiar with assessing those environments as well as it relates to assessing vertically integrated without operation and ISO market utility performance overall, and our utility M&A experience, as well as mentioned earlier, some Colorado testimony as it relates to wind ramp down events and the need for quick start generation, and ultimately what the opportunity cost is for the need for increased amounts of ancillary services when you add intermittent renewables to the system.
Thank you. Similarly, could you describe or explain any experience that y'all have with regulating reserve requirements on a utility system?
Yes, this is Matt Morin, and similarly, the regulation reserves, often it depends on the specific market, but regulation itself would typically indicate a generation asset perhaps operating at partial output such that it can ramp up and or ramp down. You also have duct firing and other sorts of participation. There's also operating reserve type of ancillary services where ultimately a utility or a system would typically look to plan around the largest generation failure in terms of contingency, and then plan for the types of reserves accordingly. So those are two typical economic approaches as it relates to regulation and operating reserves specifically.
And this is Charles Janicek with PA Consulting. If I could just add on to that, specific to regulation, obviously, with the rise of first intermittent and renewable generation, as well as more recently the massive increase in electric storage facilities, regulation has become, sort of front and center for a lot of the ancillaries that we model, particularly with storage and its ability to provide regulation while at the same time providing other markets. And so we do have models that sort of co-optimize between storage, sort of acting as our price arbitration in addition to providing regulation. And also as part of the PJM market storage build out, when they introduced the regulation product to that market, there was a massive rush of storage projects that entered the market, and so that they could capitalize on being able to capture that product. And PA was sort of at the amongst our investor work at the edge of the curve, and sort of we realized quickly on that yes, there was the regulation product, but there was going to quickly be an oversupply of storage facilities trying to capture that part of the market. And we recognized that early on, and then not long after saw the crash in regulation prices in PJM due to that oversupply of facilities that provide it. So we're pretty familiar with the whole regulation angle.
Okay, thank you. You, in some of your previous answers, y'all indicated some, well, not some, but maybe a good bit of experience with IRPs. And have y'all filed testimony in IRP dockets before various commissions?
This is Charles Janicek with PA Consulting. I myself, when I was working with Xcel Energy, I developed and wrote 2 resource plans during that time frame. I was in the resource planning department, and I did not testify. I prepared the testimony of a senior officer at Xcel who directly testified. But I have personally written those IRPs. I have reviewed other utilities IRPs. I have developed IRPs documents and analysis specifically for a number of utilities. I personally am pretty familiar with the IRP planning process and the analysis and documentation behind it. I'm not sure, and I will put it to my team to ask if others have specifically testified related to specific utilities IRPs.
Well, Mr. Janchek, if I could just follow up with you for a moment. That was at a time where you were employed by the utility, is that correct? Since you've been working like with PA Consulting, have y'all filed testimony or critiques or any kind of report on IRPs for utilities or advocated for or against IRPs, a utilities IRP?
This is Matt Morin, to be followed up by Jim Heidel. So in our sort of overall market outlooks, we review the majority of IRPs in the country to effectively help triangulate our view of the clean energy transition, which in simplified terms would be the glide path of and the sustenance of natural gas generation and coal-fired generation, and for what period of time, which is effectively a state-by-state view. A place like New York would have aspirations to have a glide path and retirement of natural gas in the, say, 2030s timeframe. Whether that's achievable is a critical question. And many of the Southeast states, including South Carolina, would typically look to have a much longer sustenance of natural gas, just by way of comparison. And so we look at the IRPs that are filed with a critical eye across the country. And then in the case of utility mergers and acquisitions, we've advised the majority of large utility financial interest purchase and sale that have occurred in the last half decade. And in those contexts, when the utilities are vertically integrated electric utilities, looking at the integrated resource plan and which often can be different than what the actual glide path and overall generation changes may be in the long run. We have to look at that with a critical eye. And then in addition, we have provided testimony around resource planning. Over to Jim.
This is Jim Heidel. This was a while ago, so I'd have to check on the date. PA, we did did an IRP work for Montana Dakota Utilities, and we testified in Minnesota about that IRP, as well as I believe North Dakota.
Okay.
And Matt Morin again. There was also the recent Louisiana testimony, Jim, as it relates to a cooperative setting up its own resource plan.
Okay. I understand that on your website, there's a description of your employees as applying their integrity to deliver end-to-end innovation with our clients while creating a fairer society, positively impacting the environment, and upholding the highest ethical standards. Does that description have any role in determining avoided costs in South Carolina or avoided cost rates that an electrical utility may offer to small power producers?
This is Matt Morin again, Madam Vice Chair. Just for slight clarification, PA's mission is to bring ingenuity to life, and our energy and utility team's mission is to be the leading advisor of the clean energy transition. As energy policy, market, and rate advisors, it's critical that, as mentioned earlier, we maintain independence while being thoughtful about the long-term role of natural gas, coal, nuclear, and so on a state-by-state basis, and how that aligns ultimately to the public sentiment as well as policy. And as it relates to creating a fair society, that would apply to avoided cost, obviously. We also believe that there are both statutes and precedents that need to be followed. And at the same time, we understand that the principles of avoided cost should be applied in a manner that ultimately recognizes that the nature of the power supply system and marginal costs are impacted by changing technology, economics, public policy, and so on.
Thank you. Are you aware that while some of the utilities in South Carolina may have goals for achieving carbon reduction goals, there is no state policy in South Carolina for that? Are y'all aware of that?
This is Matt Morin. That is a absolutely critical juxtaposition in the industry overall. The fact that ESG declarations have been made by the corporate holding companies of vertically integrated utilities, in this case, obviously electric, having that juxtaposition with, ultimately what the public policy and legislation that is set forth on a state-by-state basis as it relates to clean energy. We ultimately look at things through a lens of, the utility standards of reliable, affordable, safe, secure, resilient energy. And where clean comes into the equation is, back to the public sentiment and public policy and the direction that's taking, as well as the economic piece, while also ensuring that resilient, reliable system.
Okay. Thank you very much.
This is Jim Heidel. If I could add, we're aware of the statute, and we understand also that the avoided cost is also focused on providing low-cost power for the South Carolina customers. So we're very aware that that is part of the statute, and and that has to be considered. That is a primary consideration in the avoided cost analysis.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, any further questions?
Madam Chair, I have one question, please.
Commissioner Powers.
I think it was Mr. Morin was talking about it earlier, that you helped prepare some advocacy positions for parties in, might have been North Dakota. Were these positions prepared for environmental groups or for who was it prepared for? What parties?
This is Charles Janicek, and I apologize, but I think it may have been my comments that you were referencing. Yeah, sure. And really what I was getting at is in those cases, any opinions and analysis that we provided were directly to the advocacy staff of the Public Service Commission of North Dakota. No external environmental or third-party organizations, but directly for the staff of North Dakota.
Okay, thank you very much.
I apologize. I didn't look down at my own notes. As I explained earlier at the beginning of the proceeding, we are trying to get ahead this time so that we have our consultant in place at the time the applications are filed. If your group is selected as the consultant, do you have processes in place to make sure that y'all would not engage or take on work that could create a conflict with these cases?
This is Jim Heidel from PA Consulting. Yes, we have processes. Essentially, this process is that we put leads into a corporate database, and that identifies whether there if there's other work being done for the clients or potential conflict checks. So that's how we do that with all assignments, and then we identify if there are any potential conflicts, and we speak to the people who are working on those jobs.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is Matt Morin, just to add on. I mean, that's a typical process of ours. And we would also typically nominate an independent individual in PA's partnership to also help manage that process for the checks and balances, and also to maintain the reputational, very good standing of the firm. Additionally, that is something that we often apply as it relates to our work with policymakers and regulators. It's of utmost importance that we don't find the individuals that we have in those contexts being placed in positions where there could be a perceived or actual conflict of interest.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, anything further? Hearing none, gentlemen, thank you very much for your patience today and your responses. It's been about 2 hours, but it doesn't seem that long. It was a very interesting conversation, interview, however you want to phrase it, but I appreciate your candor. I believe that y'all have a schedule that's been issued on when the next steps are due. Unfortunately, we had a conflict with another possible consultant that they couldn't be heard this week, but they will be heard next week, and then we'll follow up. So please note the date of the final conflicts letter, close of business. I believe it's May 23rd. If I said that wrong, go with what's on the paper that you have. But I'm not the official version. That order is. So, is there anything else y'all want to bring before us?
Madam Vice Chair, just wanted to express a thank you to you and the commissioners for allowing PA the opportunity to have this Q&A, and we appreciate the consideration and everyone taking their time today.
Well, thank you. We appreciate y'all's presentation and your appearance here today. So thank you very much. With that, we're going to close this special business meeting, and thank you very much, gentlemen. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.